Welcome to the Planning Commission. Going to get everybody's attention, please. Can't hear? Is that better? Have to swallow the mic? Okay. Thank you, folks, for coming tonight. We appreciate your attendance. I'm Paul Allred. I'm going to be a chairperson tonight for the Planning Commission, Kaysville Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is mostly a recommending body. The items that were scheduled for tonight, one has been postponed, just for your information. The first rezone, which was for down on Sunset Lane, close to where it turns into Shepherd Lane, has been continued. So if you're here for that item, you're welcome to stick around, but you also don't need to hang around for that item, as we will not be hearing it tonight. Again, the Planning Commission's a recommending body for the most part. We do make some decisions that don't go to City Council, but the one item that we will hear tonight is an item that will go to the Council eventually, no matter what the Planning Commission does, whether we recommend up or down or what we do tonight, it will go to the Council. So you'll need to make sure that you have your eyes and ears open for when the Council will consider that. So this is just step one in the process. We're going to take the approval of the minutes from the August 10th meeting, and we're going to continue those, as we do not have. Were any of us there for the 10th? We have one member there. We only have one member that was at the. Aaron, were you there on the 10th?
I think so.
We don't have enough people to act on that tonight who are at that meeting, so we're going to continue those minutes to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We'll leave that to staff. And what we'll do is we will go ahead and move to our first and only action item tonight, which is the rezone proposal from Hal Anderson at 41 West 100 South for a rezone petition from R18 single family residential to RM multiple family residential. And before we get started, this is how we're going to conduct the business tonight. The first thing that we'll do is we'll allow our staff to present the staff report. After the staff report, if the Planning Commission has any technical questions for the staff, we'll have the Planning Commission ask the staff for any clarifications. After that, we will then have the applicant approach and give a presentation on their application, their petition for rezone. After the applicant has had a chance to speak to the Planning Commission on their petition, we will then open it up for public comment. Now, as there's a lot of people here tonight, I guess most of you are here for this item. By show of hands, who's here for this rezone petition? Okay. So, as we'd probably like to adjourn before midnight, what I'd recommend is that this is the way we normally do public hearings, is everyone who would like to speak. Can I have a show of hands of those who are planning to speak? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I think we've got a manageable group, 8 or 10 plus the applicant. What we're going to do is we're going to ask those who would like to speak to the petition after the applicant has made his petition clear. We're going to limit individual comment to 3 minutes. If somebody is going to speak for a group, is there anybody here going to speak for a group? Okay, we'll allow 2 extra minutes for someone who's going to speak for a group. And one thing that we would sincerely ask you to do is we would ask anyone who's here to comment tonight to not repeat what has been said before. If you want to come up and say, I agree with what was said before, that's great. But unless it's something new or different, we don't need to hear it, over and over and over again, okay? I hope you can understand that. We're not trying to shut people down. Just repetition makes everybody go home later. Okay, so we'll start. Oh, yes, staff. It's okay.
Just to let everyone know who did send in an email, those emails, and I think by now we've probably gotten over 20. Those emails are directly sent to each of the planning commissioners. So those...
The emails that everyone sent in to the city, those were distributed to the planning commissioners. And the planning commissioners have had a chance to read those. And hopefully the planning commissioners have all gone and visited the site. I did, and I have a pretty good feel for it. And so your comments have been read by the planning commission and the staff. Does that work? Okay, we're going to turn this over to Dan Jessup, our staff, and let him handle the presentation.
Here we go. I'm going to tell you the story. Hal came in and put in an application for a rezone.
Dan, microphone. Really got to put.
Hal came in and submitted an application for a rezone last year, and then he tabled it. I'm not sure reason, and he came back this year, so we're starting all over again. You've been notified, and we've done all the due diligence for notifications. The rezone is, I'm sure everybody knows, it's 41 West, 100 South. It's that corner. Everybody knows where the corner is. It's a beautiful corner. The trees are there. It's a nice piece of property. What the current zone is for now is a R18 single family residential. His rezoning application is for RM residential, multifamily residential. So he's still rezoned for residential. The difference is R18 is a single family R, 8,000 square foot, and the RM is anywhere from 7,000 or 8,000 square feet on up to however many it is. And you can assign, or you can do math and get a number for dwellings available on the unit. And so what they have there is 2.3 acres. So you can go down through do the math. What the math says in the ordinance is you can take the square footage and divide by 2,800 square feet. And that's how in RM zone, they come up with the max number of 37 units. I'm sure that's got everybody's attention. The R1 zone, you take 8,000 square feet, they got to meet so much frontage and meet the requirements, and that zone ordinance tells you how many lots of 8,000 minimum or maximum you can go, depending on the square footage, how much frontage you want to do. So I think we come up with, if they'd done minimum 60 foot, you get a few more. If you go wider, you get a few less lots. But that's how the lots were determined for, I think they had 8 on one side, 3, 11. And I think we come up with, if you went less frontage, you would get 13 or something. So that's the numbers you guys are aware of on my staff report. We'll slide down to the surrounding land use. So adjacent to the property to the east, you've got RM already existing. You got townhomes and whatever those condo apartment RM zone. Then directly to the west of it, you got the R1. Those are the new houses they built. That's, if you go west and south, you're gonna get into the Happy Homes area. That's all the R1 zones. If you go north, directly across the street, you're into the central commercial zone, which is basically where the theater is, the banks are, the restaurants are, downtown Main Street, Kaysville. Everybody knows that. Ice cream shop. Then you go to the west. We've already discussed that. North, commercial. East, already we have a lot of RM all the way from the insurance office clear down to the school, basically. You have a lot of RM. The general plan, which everybody we got comments says we spent a lot of money on it, and they are right. The city, we done that for 3 years, I believe. We had a little downtown meet. Everybody got to come put dots on the map where you wanted your residential, where you wanted your townhomes, where you wanted this, that, green space. we had dots all over that. We've done that for, I don't know, 6 meetings. We've done some downtown, we've done some open houses in the city, and that's what kind of built the general plan. The general plan was established with all the input from the community, and it was basically your plan. We paid somebody a bunch of money and present to us. That's where that come from. The future land map was in that plan, and that's what everybody was looking at when we got the letters. They're saying, hey, the future land map shows this is an R1 zone. You're 100% right. It's a yellow. It's there, big as life. The problem, well, not the problem, the other thing with that is there's also on page 54 of the Planning Commission, they should give consideration to applications which support the elements of the general plan that may not align with the future land map. So what that means is you have the future land map. It's going to show that house is single family, but then it also gives consideration to the document once they start supporting other directions for zoning. You have to consider it. Planning Commission will, council will, staff has to, and the applicant can submit his application with that being said. I don't know what's going on. And then what we have too is we have what the goals and the housing and the objectives for the RM. So we've established the plan, shows the map of the single-family dwelling. Then you also have the one clause in there that says maintain character of the established. Everybody brought that up in their emails. So we have the map and you have the established character. But then if you look at that, across the streets you have the commercial, across the other street you have all the RM. So it kind of lets that play out to however it rolls out tonight. You can go either way. We go down to the things now that the general plan starts supporting the moderate income housing, the housing, you run into housing, I'm trying to say it, moderate income housing, then you have diversified housing, and we're going to have quite a few items here that start supporting the RM. And they range from the goals to provide full range of housing opportunities to meet the economic lifestyle needs and expectations for residents. You get into the density, allow for higher density, close to the city center. Well, that argument's right across the street. There's the city center. They're a block away from the theater, the ice cream, the groceries, basically what that's trying to do is put doors within walking distance of your downtowns. That's where that lot is. It's across the street, downtown. I mean, it's just where it is. Then we go back into the moderate income housing, then you start getting into the state. And the state is mandating that these communities, city councils, planning commissions start looking for moderate income housing, and everybody knows why. It's hard to find your kids a place to live. It's hard to find people that outgrow their house. Their kids move away, they want to downsize. They need more diversified housing in communities. And so that's another thing that we have to look at. That's another thing that's going to support the RM. Okay, and then we get into the zoning. And this is I've spent 2 weeks on this, and I'm probably as sentimental to that corner as anybody in this place. I've lived here my whole life. I hate to see change. I'm with you guys. But after doing my homework and my working on this for 2 weeks, I'm gonna give you guys all the bullets I've come up with, so you guys can have emotional, but you'll also have plenty of bullets for your discussion, and you guys will know what's going on. The R18 zone is a single family zone, and when I pulled the tape on my computer, you could go down 50 West, and you could, if you go with the minimum 60 lots, you get like 12 or something, and anyway, I come up with 13 lots if I go minimum. If I add, and this is what a developer will do, he could probably go 64 foot, and once you got that much frontage, you're gonna be able to start subdividing with a conditional use and get twin homes. So instead of 11 houses with the single family R18, you could potentially wake up with 21 twin homes. You could, or 22, double that, 11 lots. And then the R18 zone is going to prescribe setbacks. So you're going to have a 25-foot setback, you're going to have an 8-foot side setback, and you're going to have a 15-foot setback on all them R1 lots. So you can just plan on prescribed setbacks. And you could go down 50 West that way, then you can go up the first south and get 3 lots that way. On everybody's email, we're talking about safety, that blind curve, and heck, I've almost been taken out on that curve. You got people trying to beat the light coming around the curve, going 30 mile an hour, and I 100% agree with everybody's comment. Hey, we're worried about safety. The thing with the R18 is if you get 11 houses, split that up into 22, you're gonna have 22 driveways right there on that corner. That's something to consider. That's with the R18 zone. Then you're gonna have 22 sewer and waters going out in the road, 22 water lines. Pretty soon you got all that we're looking at with the R18. So that's what R18, the best case scenario would be little patio homes everybody likes. The other scenario would be twin homes, townhouses that look like those ones over at the motel. You pull into the garage, main floor, and the bedroom's upstairs, so you'd have 30-foot high possible twin homes on that lot. And they'd go all the way down the street. The RM zone, this is what I've done when I started doing this, is I started looking at the RM zone. What the RM zone is going to give us is a 25 setback on one side, 20 on the other side, because you have frontage and then you have a side abutting the street. Then you're going to have a front yard, backyard. Side yards, every unit that they start adding to the RM unit is going to start kicking after two units, it starts kicking each side yard in 2 feet. So in order to get 37 units, which the math works out, it won't work out, I don't believe, once you start squishing in. They could go 30 foot, but you're gonna wind up with maybe less units. You're gonna wind up with maybe smaller, to get the number up there, just like studio apartments or something. Less bedrooms, more units to get to the units, but that's less rent for people to get their kid out of their basement. So I can see where that is needed in our community, because there's nothing under $1,800 a month for rent. So that's another pro for RM. The RM zone, once you start looking at the RM zone is going to give a developer more opportunity to make a better project, I think. Because if you go with the R1 zone, they're going to probably have to take out all those beautiful trees on the first south, because they're going to want to put their houses as close as they can to the setback, so the driveway's ain't as long as money. The closer it is less money they pay. And that would start messing with our trees. On the other side, you got the big willow tree, you got all that stuff. That would for sure have to go. And that, you know, that's just R18 zone. If we go with the RM zone, it's going to give a developer flexibility to move the building around. It's going to make him have a drive, which is more manageable because they can do it with a single drive in, single drive out. So that means on the west side of First South, you could have people pull in as far away from that intersection as possible. We could have them come out on the south end of 50 West. That would develop a less traffic area, less driveways by that corner. That's something to consider. The RM zone would give them latitude to make like one sewer line to catch all the units, take out in the road. You'd only have one cut, one water line, one everything to service all those. And the rest would all the infrastructure and the utility lines would be contained on the property rather than going out into the street that many times. You'd only have maybe 2 cuts. That's another positive for the RM zone. The other thing is you'll have parking. Parking will be regulated in the RM zone. They'll have to provide parking for everybody, and that will eat up some room, which will start to constrict the building, start to maybe lessen the 37 number that everybody's scared of. I think when it's all said and done, both zones could wind up potentially about the same amount of units. The only thing is the RM would give you is, hopefully if the right developer comes in, a lot better project to live next door to. And I hate to say it, but I think the RM is the best choice. And I'll leave that up for you guys for discussion now.
Thank you, Mr. Jessup. Thank you, Mr. Jessup, for your staff report and your work and detail. We appreciate that. We're now going to have the applicant come and speak. We're not going to put a 3-minute time limit on him, but we'd ask you to be to the point, and then we'll conduct our public hearing afterwards.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, will you give us your name and address?
Commissioners, staff, everyone, good evening. My name is Hal Anderson.
Your address?
I live in Farmington at 727 Kensington Street. We own this home and have for several years. I have a son that's lived there for 10 plus years.
Okay, they're having a hard time hearing you, Hal. Will you just make sure you just almost swallow that? Put it right up to your mouth. There you go. We've got some people in the back waving, so we're trying to...
So I live in Farmington.
Thank you.
The home that is in question, of course, is at 41 West, 100 South. A little bit of history. I became acquainted with Kaysville in 1974. There was a beautiful little gal living in that house, and I ended up living in that house by the end of 1974. So for almost 50 years, I've been associated with that property. If history serves us correctly, the famous architect William Allen drew in that home, and it was Richard Barnes was built for him in 1873. The Burton family in 1913, some 40 years later, purchased the home. My mother-in-law was Alice Burton, and she was born in one side of the home in 1922, and she died in the other side of the home in 2010. And she loved that home. We love that home. There are events in life that nudge us in certain directions. Kaysville certainly today isn't what it was when I moved here in 1974. The livestock, the fields and everything that in more of a rural agrarian home and community has been replaced. So change is inevitable. The change that has precipitated me being here this evening started about 2 years ago. 2 years ago in September, I had a stroke. And this ischemic stroke, as I spent a couple days in the intensive care, you start thinking differently. I'm an older man. I'm in my 76th year. And 2.39, 2.4 acres is a project. And we don't outsource it. Some tree trimming now and again, but we do the work ourselves. I don't know another property around like this. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, but shelf life for we humans being what it is, there's got to be a change. So we're here to see if we can't address this change in the most efficient and inviting manner for this community. And as we have researched and as Dan has so elegantly spoke about the various options, it appears that the RM zoning may be something that is, or the option that may be the most inviting for Kaysville. Wonderful location, walk to schools, walk to church, transportation. We love it. But as with many of our experiences and situations in life, life moves on. So we are requesting the change as we've worked with the state planning people and attorneys the last couple of years, trying to get our affairs in a manageable state. We feel like that to divest ourselves of this property is going to be the easiest way for the family to proceed at that point and when they need to. So rather than get boxed right into a corner, we're here this evening saying would like to be a little bit proactive. We'd address this in a way that it can be developed and be an asset to the city, something that beautify the city, we hope. We're not developers. Incidentally, we do not have any developers on the line or on the string. This is an independent approach. When I first met with Dan here, April, May of last year, 2022, and we applied for a rezone. There was, it just didn't fit, it wasn't quite right. And we held back, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to keep that place up. And it's a beautiful project, a beautiful home, but it's more than we can deal with. So we ask for your consideration. We think from the estate planning view, it's the best way to address our family needs, and hopefully we can meet the needs of the community. The multifamily directives that are coming from the state perhaps can be addressed as well. But my dear mother-in-law, very lovely person. The last thing she would want to see is that home leave the family, but times have changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your comments. And now, before we open the public hearing, I want to ask the Planning Commission if they have any questions or comments for staff and or the applicant. Any clarifications?
Commissioner Allred, I'd
Yes.
like to just add a few things, if that's all right with the commission.
Absolutely, yes. This is Melinda Greenwood, our Community Development Director. So,
I want to pull up the single-family zoning code to just show you what Mr. Jessup was speaking about. So we have a provision in our single-family zone that twin homes, right here, twin homes are a conditional use permit, or a conditional use. So with the R18 zoning and the math working out, yeah, they could probably fit about 13 lots. Then, as Mr. Jessup was explaining, with the twin home and the requirements for frontage and that type of a thing, you could end up with 11 twin homes or a total of 22 units. And that's not anything the city could prohibit or stop, because the way state laws work, conditional uses are essentially a permitted use that may need some additional conditions placed on them to maybe mitigate impacts that it may have to the surrounding area. I want to just pull up also, actually let me go back to that. Last year we had a rezone come through for the community garden. I think probably everyone here is familiar with this, just down 475 South. And the applicant came in, wanted to rezone that property to RM as well. The council ended up denying that. Through the process, just the straight math would have allowed 8 units. The Planning Commission wanted to mitigate that impact, and we were directed to come back with a development agreement that would limit the number of units to 6. Again, that was eventually denied, but some of the concerns that were expressed by the residents in that area included traffic, included safety. There's some curvature to the road here. There's concerns, about people trying to turn onto Main Street, legitimate concerns. But the thing that I think ended up being the outcome really was, I think, in staff's opinion, really a worse option for the neighborhood, and here's why. Instead of again, same number of units, so 6. Instead of one driveway with egress, ingress that we would have required to be on 475 South, and we would have required it to be parallel, directly across the street from the driveway to the church, which is just a safer situation for traffic. You are now going to have 6 driveways on that street. And I think that's what Mr. Jessup was trying to explain. With single family, if they did just the 8,000 square foot lots, you would have a total of 8 driveways. If they do the twin homes, you could have a total of 22 driveways backing out onto 50 West and then 100 South. You usually back in and out of a driveway when you have a parking lot where people are coming in and out. Most of the time people are heading out onto the street instead of backing out. So from a safety standpoint, I think this is a similar scenario where you could end up with quite a few units, but way more driveways, which is a trickier situation for traffic. There were 2 other things I wanted to just point out. A lot of the comments came back saying, and I'm sorry, I have herniated discs and I cannot sit. Okay, sorry. And let me say it again, because this is the 4th time. So with the, a lot of the comments that came in was that this is a historic property. Any property that's over 50 years of age could be listed on a historic registry. This property is not listed on a historic registry, and according to the applicant, never has been. But I did go to the federal government's national registry. It is not there. We do not have a local registry here in Kaysville. There are some communities that do, but we don't. And so this is not technically, while it meets the criteria, it could be listed as a historic property. It is not listed anywhere. And then the last thing that I wanted to just cover, when we look at rezone applications specifically, what we do as staff is we look at all of all the context of the general plan, which is 90 pages. The future land use map is just one portion of the general plan. And so we look at the guiding principles with which Mr. Jessup also mentioned. The guiding principles are essentially all of the goals and objectives in each of the chapters should funnel back into those guiding principles and somehow tie in to say, here's our overarching principles, and these goals and objectives support these guiding principles in this way. So we look through each chapter. We have 5 chapters. At the end of those chapters, that's where the goals and the objectives come in. And so what we do is we look, and I read through the goals and objectives again this afternoon, and we kind of see where do the scales tip. And I know this is going to be contrary opinion to many of you in the room, but as we looked at this, we felt like the scales did tip in favor of rezoning this property. And then when you come to some of those practical logistics, as Mr. Jessup was explaining, you could end up with as many units but a better project simply because of the requirements that are more stringent when you do get into the RM zone with setbacks, with parking, with the ability to place buildings in a manner that may be able to save trees. So those are some of the benefits, but what I really wanted to just spend a moment on is over the last probably 6 or 7 years, the state legislature has been incredibly focused on trying to provide housing options that are more affordable to people in the state. A lot of times that's misconstrued as affordable housing or subsidized housing. The way the state defines the moderate income housing is that it needs to be affordable for anyone that is 80% or below of the area median income, which in Davis County is 90-something thousand. And so essentially anything about $80,000 a year in annual salary or below would be classified as moderate income housing. As each year has passed and each legislative session has come forward, there have been more and more requirements that the state representatives and senators have pushed down onto cities and counties, and that's where, let me go back to the slide that shows our Chapter 3, our Housing and Land Use Plan. So I think this is the portion of the general plan that gives the most strength to this application. But what the state has done, again, over the last few years is made these requirements, we've had to incorporate these requirements into our general plan. So we modified the general plan last November to become into compliance with what the state has set forward. And then we have to report every year to the state of what our progress has been on all of these items that we've outlined in our state plan. And then they have staff and a committee that goes and says, is the city or county that submitted this plan, are they in compliance or are they not in compliance? A few years ago, there was really no teeth to whether or not you were in compliance or not. The state, again, each year has eroded our ability, and I think most communities' abilities to really be more discretionary in whether or not we approve or deny these things. And where things stand right now is that if we were to be deemed non-compliant, we could face fines, daily fines. I think it's like $250 a day, or is it like $750? We would be deemed ineligible for certain grant applications that comes through Wasatch Front Regional Council or UDOT for road projects. And so where in the past, the elected officials really had a lot more say in whether or not these things are approved, the state's really tying our hands for those outcomes. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context with that. This, I think, has been a very frustrating thing. There's about 250 cities and towns in the county. There's 250 cities and towns in the state, 29 counties. Of those, the state legislation has required that like 93 of the cities and counties have to have this moderate income housing. If you're a smaller city, you don't have to have these plans. But Kaysville is one of those cities that is required to have this plan. We submitted our plan on August 1st of this year. We have not heard yet as to whether or not we would be in compliance. But one of the things to consider, and one of the things that the city council will have to consider when they make this decision, is how that may impact our compliance with the state. So just a little bit more context to some of the items that Mr. Jessup was speaking about, and then the moderate income housing elements that we're just really having to put into place because the state law mandates that.
Thank you, staff. Again, I'll reiterate, any questions from the commission to the staff at this point? Clarifications?
Yes, I'd just like to clarify, there aren't any development plans for the lot yet as far as how this might lay out?
No, as far as I know right now, Hal has no really developers looking at it. I think he did let off that he has potential buyers, but no developers have approached him yet.
I guess my question is, without the development plan, should we rezone and then development plans come in where it's technically outside that central district, the city center? Do we have flexibility on the plan as it comes in?
So I actually reached out to, if it's okay, Dan, I'll take this. I actually reached out to the state moderate income housing coordinator today. Wasn't able to get a hold of them, but I have the same question as to like what this particular scenario would mean as far as compliance. I think as far as like the proximity to the city center, I think that's just illustrative of just how close we are to that concept that was approved in the plan. So, it's hard to say, but I do think that it's worth noting that, within a half block walking distance is commercial. There's a lot of services that, one of the things when you look at these types of developments is you do want to place these in areas where people could leave their vehicle and walk to some type of commercial service or retail service that they would want to be in. Technically, this is not in the city center area, but again, worth noting that it's within a half block. And I don't know if that answers your question, but some of the requirements and how the state's going to interpret requirements is just unknown.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing no other comments at this point from the staff or the Planning Commission, we'll now open up the public hearing. For those of you who would like to speak, please raise your hand, and when you come up, please try to remember what we talked about earlier. Try not to be repetitious. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, we'll give you a couple more minutes. We'll give you 5 minutes, and Mindy will watch the clock for us. Go ahead and raise your hands if you'd like to come up, and we'll start here and just, okay. And again, please give us your name and address.
My name is Mark Quillen. I live at 33 South, 300 West, so 2 blocks away. Just a concerned neighbor that wanted to come and speak. I agree with the owner of the property that says life goes on, and my life will go on in that neighborhood. It's where I raised my kids. I've been there for 10 years. And so I will deal with the outfall of however this development goes by having a lot more properties there. So I'm very invested in that. I bought a home here because it's single-family homes, not because it's high-density housing. Homes with a yard where families are, where people stay, where it's not going to be a lot of people coming and going. If I wanted that, I would go down to Station Park or somewhere down there where they're doing these mass developments. We currently have one that's, I don't know if it's been approved, the one over by the freeway right behind Les Schwab. That's being proposed at least. I think the biggest thing for me is safety. My kids have walked back and forth to school on that street. I have 4 kids that have gone to Columbia, to Kaysville Junior High. I run on that corner 3 days a week in the mornings, sometimes later in the day. That is an extremely busy intersection. It's hard to see the kids crossing the road already. It's hard for the kids to see the cars already. You have the dental office, which is right there, and everybody parks their cars right along that street. It's very busy. It makes it even worse. That street backs up very far. I go to work out that intersection every day as well. So safety is my primary concern, but also the type of community that I want to live in. I chose to live there because of the homes that were there. I would also say that, I'm not suggesting that someone who owns a property can't sell a property. I think they should be allowed to do what they want with it. All we're asking is that the city does not rezone it. It's currently for single-family standalone homes, and I think that is appropriate, especially in the neighborhood that we live in. I think the topic of affordable housing has come up, and the reason there's not affordable housing, single-family standalone homes, is because they're not being built. It's a supply and demand issue. It's economics. If you build more of those homes, prices come down. I don't think most people dream of living in townhomes and apartments. They want single-family standalone homes. They've done surveys on this across the country, and the overwhelming majority of people want to grow up and they want a home for their family. If we're trying to make them affordable, put the smaller homes on that property, and that is an opportunity for someone to get into the market at a smaller home at a lower price point. But I would also say, what guarantee do we have that the prices are going to be lower? Is it going to be the market rate? I mean, are they going to put some sort of ceiling on the pricing? And the fact of the matter is, homes are going for a lot of money. Obviously, they will go less if they're smaller, but that's not going to impact the price per square foot. So I think that the way it is zoned right now and has always been zoned is appropriate. I feel like the owner should be able to sell the property. We're just asking you not to change the zoning. And, I live here. I'm invested in Kaysville, and so that's important to me, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two. Her first, then you. Yep.
Sorry, I will be fast. I have to go home and put kids to bed. I agree with what he said.
Name and address, ma'am.
Liz Brumbaugh.
We don't need an address.
Perfect.
The city of residence.
Kaysville. On 100 West. Anyways, I agree with what he said. Please don't rezone. And the topic that came up with the 13 driveways coming out on the main road. Can I come up there just to point on that map? So
There's a pointer right there.
Where? Oh, awesome. Thanks. Sorry, I'm kind of shaking. I don't know how to use it.
You just push the button.
I'm pushing it.
Right there.
Okay, so instead of having driveways right here, why don't we put a road that goes through and the driveways can be all in there, and then we only have our 1 exit, 2 exit, which will solve the problem that you said earlier. We don't have to worry about all the driveways on the main road, and it can be kind of just, like 80 lane over here, just kind of go for that. Keep it with your 13 houses, nice and easy, and the kids will have another nice street to go down maybe instead of this main road. Could be helpful all around. And yes, this traffic is awful all the time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Then you. 1, 2. No, after her. Thank you.
My name is Garrett Gross. I'm also a citizen of Kaysville City.
Speak into the microphone a little better.
It's a little,
People won't hear you.
A little short for me. But,
Okay.
I've been a citizen of Kaysville City for about 13 years. My biggest concern in talking, in reviewing the city's proposed plan to rezone is that a proposed plan at this point is premature. I think there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of assumptions about state mandates and other types of requirements that the city might be required to fulfill when there's not even a guarantee that a rezone to RM housing will necessarily fulfill those mandates. We've got multifamily housing, 167 units within the 4-block radius of that general area. We've got, we're essentially, there's going to be proposed just around the corner, the Creekside Commons, I think was just approved, not just proposed, but approved, which is a giant, unit that should, I think, help meet some of these state mandated needs. The concern that I have when we're talking about diversity of housing is R18 housing. In that we realize that it's adjacent to the old historic Kaysville area. R18 housing is what it's essentially been zoned for, but R18 housing in the city of Kaysville itself is becoming very scarce. I think it was mentioned before. You've got a lot of homes in West Kaysville that are large, unaffordable for people that are looking for that particular segment. So given that we're already meeting within the 4-block radius of this general area, those needs of the multifamily housing, it seems to me to be premature when we do not actually necessarily have a developer in place to propose a rezone. We're not saying necessarily don't rezone, but until we're aware of what those mandates are and we're aware of what is being proposed with what was discussed here, there were a lot of assumptions in there that we just don't know what that's going to look like at this point. So at this point, we think we would ask that the commission would table this discussion of a proposed rezone until there's more solidified plans and requirements in place. We do realize that change is inevitable, and we're not trying to alienate or restrict what is inevitable, but I think at this time, any discussion of a proposed rezone is premature.
Question for you before you leave.
Yeah.
When you said the word table, what is your understanding of the word table in the context of the Planning Commission?
Just discuss it later. I mean, we think any discussion or consideration or decision to rezone should be reconsidered at a later time when more formidable, more concrete plans are in place.
In the language of the Planning Commission and public hearings, table means indefinite.
Okay.
Continue means at some point in the near future.
Okay.
Which one are you?
I would say continue.
Continue. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Hi, Kara Hurst, and I live on Gailey Lane. Kind of piggybacking off what Garrett said about, I feel like the city loses significant leverage, and I think your question was trying to address that. But if a plan from a developer was submitted later, would the city have significant input in that? There's a development going on in Fruit Heights right now, and the developers are paying for a new trail, are paying for a new parking lot at a trailhead, and also they're paying for new power lines. And so why can't Kaysville City have that kind of power on a lot like this, especially so close to downtown and so close to that historic area of Kaysville, of trying to comply with the feel and the tone of the area, and with the safety too. We can make the developers help with that crazy intersection right there. We can get money from them. We can demand things, and I don't know why we would rezone it now without a plan in place. So yeah.
Thank you. I believe you're speaking for a group? Okay.
Hey, everybody. My name's Chris Doxey. I live at 143 Gailey Lane, just right there. My backyard touches the property. Just wanted to appreciate the chance to speak. I also appreciate Dan. That's a ton of work. Great points. I'm not sentimental to the corner. I know it's at some point that's going to get developed, and great. I think that would be fine. Life goes on. I think if some of the proposals, the things that we're saying, like, oh, that could be this, it could be that, I think would be okay. I think my concern is it's a lot of coulds, not a lot of this is what it's going to be. But my main concern is, like, this sets a bit of a bad precedent for the city. I don't think it's consistent with anything that we've zoned before. So I looked for past items that would match this type of property bordered on. The only one I found, I think, was the one that she brought up, which was denied. If you look at the zoning map, you'll see every other multifamily in the city has over 50% of their borders are touching commercial property. This would not be that. So this would be different than every other one if you look at the zoning map. And they also all share a block with multiple use things. So if you look across the street, similar, right? There is multifamily there. It touches several borders with commercial, either it's commercial, hospital, or medical, or business, right? And then that block is shared with, there is residential on that block, but it has shared with commercial and multifamily. This would not be the case. This would be the only place in the city where the one piece of that block is multifamily without any residential touching it. So, and you can look at the zoning map for that. Even if you include what's across the road, that's still 75% is going to be surrounded by single-family homes. Again, there's nowhere else like that in the city that has 75% bordering with single-family homes. I just think it creates a risky precedent because you're carving out a piece of this single-family home, of these homes, putting this there, which we've never done before. And I just think you need to think hard about that. Like, is that a risky precedent that you want to set without a plan, without knowing what this is going to be? Again, it might be fine, but I don't know. And so I'm just concerned that is inconsistent and the precedent would be set. And now that opens up other places within the city that you could do this type of thing. And it's on the books, right? And so those are my main concerns. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Gentleman back here. And ma'am, after him, you're next.
My name is Reese Cooper. I live here in Kaysville, just south of this property on 100 West. I just had a question to start with. Has there been a third-party community impact study done on this proposal?
No, sir.
No? Okay.
Will you want to explain what it is you're asking for everybody, including me?
So yeah, just an independent community impact study to see what any type of proposal that could be brought forward on developing the property, what type of impact that would have on the surrounding area.
Oh, okay.
One concern I have is with stormwater drainage. The area, this older part in Happy Homes and in the older historic part of Kaysville, I mean, everything on 100 West and northwest of this property doesn't even have curb and gutter. Like you're running into drainage ditches. But during the last large rainstorm that we had here in Kaysville earlier this year, 250 South flooded, 350 South flooded, Larkin Lane flooded, Christine flooded. People were kayaking in the streets. So as this property gets developed, right now it's large, it's open, it's grassy. Any of the water that's going to come to that property is going to sink down into the ground. Once it gets developed, that's all going to become runoff. That's going to run west and south into the neighborhoods and continue flooding homes and everything west of there. 100 South had gravel that had been spread from the soft shoulders out into the road. So just something to take into consideration there is how the development of that is going to impact. Traffic's been brought up. I'm not going to belabor that point other than to say there are only 3 lights out of the neighborhood, 200 West, 50 West, and 350 South. One of those lights passes 2 different schools. Having lived in this area for 5 years, people regularly travel down 50 West already at speeds in excess of 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. The city does not enforce that. Adding a lot more cars is going to be an issue for safety there. One of the concerns, or one of the proposed benefits for rezoning this to RM is that we might be able to keep some of the trees that are in the area. While I think that's a nice sentiment, No developer is going to keep trees that are going to interfere with the number of units they can squeeze onto a property. It's a nice thought. It's a happy thought. I'd love to see some of those willows stay. I just don't think that's reasonable. If we're concerned about the number of multi-unit housing or affordable housing that's going in, please know I have nothing against multi-unit, moderate, or even low-income housing. I just think there are better spots for it. I believe the Creekside development was mentioned earlier. I believe there's some apartments that were recently approved right on 200 North and Main, somewhere in that area. And there's a half-empty strip mall just a little further up on Main Street that I think has better infrastructure for large multifamily housing than trying to squeeze it into this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am.
My name is Nedra Saunders, and I live south of this property. As been mentioned, this is a unique and lovely property with lush and mature trees and near historic Old Town Kaysville. It would be lovely to preserve as much of that as possible. The traffic has been addressed. It's a wonky couple of intersections there. I have concerns also about no projected plan or design for this yet. Also, it leaves the developer a lot of latitude where we don't know what may happen. I personally I'm concerned also about needing for affordability single-family residences. This is one of my concerns. I think townhomes are going to be outdated in a while with an aging population who needs single-level living. That is, and we're not all even moderate sometimes with as far as resources and income. Anyway, I'm also concerned about uprooting a lovely, unique feeling property. So I would advocate to keep the current zoning. I would really like to advocate, please, for some creative solutions. I loved the idea that the one gal presented about possibly a street through the middle to address some of the backing out onto the more well-traveled roads, or maybe even shared driveways, possibly, so there's not getting so many driveways backing out onto Main Street. Maybe the developer would consider, in the creativity, keeping some trees and some green space, maybe not filling it up with what the maximum is allowed, but consider the lovely, unique character of this piece of property. So I would like to advocate that we preserve the charm and the beauty, maybe consider recommendations about the building style instead of just the blah, ubiquitous townhome type styles, something creative that blends, that would go along with the character of Old Town Kaysville possibly, and this beautiful green open space that we've got right now. I think we can be creative. So thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to my concerns.
Bless you.
Others who would like to comment? Sir?
My name is Warren Gates, and I live on at 91 South, 100 West, which is directly across the street from this property. And this is my first experience with planning and zoning. It's a foreign experience. I'm not sure why we're here when we don't know exactly is planned for that property. Rezone it to what? And the citizenry here, I don't think, are prepared to give an open approval to such an unknown. And planning and zoning, this is being my first experience, it appears to me that planning and zoning deals within the fence line of the property that's under question. It doesn't take enough into consideration for the surrounding area. And First West is underdeveloped. We don't have infrastructure. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have curb and gutter on both sides of the street. We don't have lighting. The street is narrow in itself, and if there's cars parked on both sides or oversized trucks, it's almost a one-way street. And it's probably for a residential zone street, it's probably the heaviest traveled. In fact, the city directs people to park on First West when there's no parking on Main Street in the business district. And we have people parking now related to business parking. They have insufficient parking on Main Street, and they're parking on 100 West, or 100 South. It's also a primary way for the children in the neighborhood to get to school. And there's no way to put a traffic light at First West and Main, or First South and Main, because you got one on I don't know what it's called after it goes past First South. The children, this neighborhood is getting younger surrounding this property. As seniors move on, we're being replaced by young people with large families. First West is a playground for the neighborhood kids. And if you come over there after school, it's also their transit route to go to school. And when you're asking us to consider rezoning, we don't know where the driveways are going to be for this property when it's developed. We don't know what additional hazards are going to be there for vehicles and children. It works fine the way it is. The children can deal with it. But if you make major changes to that property, it's going to cause some issues with children going back. And that population, my immediate neighbors average 3 children to the household in grade school. And if you come over there after school, you're going to see them on bicycles, skateboards. It's a playground.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
My time's up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You went over, but that's okay. It's okay.
Well,
thank you for your comment.
My point is, if you don't look past the fence lines for this property, you're going to create a future problem, and we should petition the city to give us the infrastructure if you approve this zoning.
Thank you. Other public comments? I see one. Come on up, ma'am. And another one.
I'm Verna, excuse me, I'm Verna Willie, and I live on Larkin Lane. Have lived here for 47 years.
A little bit closer, ma'am, to the speaker. There you go.
I'm Verna Willie, and I live on Larkin Lane, and I've lived here for 47 years. We moved out here because it was a beautiful community. My concern is why? Why in our area do we have so many apartments? Yet if you go down to West Kaysville, there may be apartments, but I'm not aware of them. Why is that? Is that because our community is more a moderate to low-income community, so you can slip this in and make something big, conglomerate mess in a cheaper area than you can in West Kaysville? Because no one down there is going to stand for it. People with money won't stand for it. Another concern is, I do know my daughter used to live in Equestrian Estates down in West Kaysville until she had to move out of state. And there is a community west of their one swimming pool that doesn't have any curb and gutters. It just has a gutter. Well, it has a gutter. It doesn't have any sidewalk. But because the housing, and they are homes, they are homes for adult people. They're almost side by side. But when people come to visit, there's no place for them to park. And I'm wondering just how the parking's going to work out if these people have visitors. Where are they going to park? Are they going to park in front of our homes? Are they going to park out on 50 West? Are they going to park over on the other side by DeFay Dental? I'm just wondering why you are picking our area. Are you trying to push us all out of the area because you can and because this is what the government wants you to do? That's pretty inconsiderate. Pick on West Kaysville.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have a couple of questions. What's the difference between R18 and RM and R120?
Dan?
Okay, an R18 is single family, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that's what it is right now.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Anderson wants to sell his property. It's his property and he has a right to sell it. Does he want to develop it himself, or is that house going to be torn down and built new homes by somebody else? That's a question I have. If he's going to keep the house and put some other homes there, that's a whole different thing than when you say 13 homes or 22 homes or 37 homes, because I heard all three of those numbers tonight. Okay, then R120, please.
R120 is single family home, 20,000 square feet. It'll have 90-foot frontage. The setbacks are 30 foot for the house, 8-foot sides, 15 in the back.
Okay, and what's the difference that and RM?
RM is going to go off of square footage of the parcel per dwelling unit.
And that's where you had the 13, the 22, and the 37. Because if there's 37 units there, you're talking about tons of people. And if there's 13, you're talking about 3 families, or 13 families maybe. And that needs to be considered as to what you allow. Because that is one small piece of property when you talk about that many homes. And if you have 37 units there, you're cramming people into that area. And it's a corner lot where people feed in. And then when the freeway is crowded or there's an accident, then those people are running down 100 South and Main Street, and those are all full too. So those are some things to consider. When Gailey Park was put in, the man who developed that property wanted to put less or more homes, smaller homes. And the people of Kaysville didn't like the fact that they wanted to put so many homes in there. And he reconsidered and put a beautiful community there. And it works fine because there's a way to get out both ways. And it takes away from there. It's not people crowding all the way. But you're talking about one corner and not one huge piece of property where they put less homes than he was going to in the first place. Okay?
Hey, ma'am, we didn't get your name. Can you give us your name before you walk away?
I'm Frances McClure, and I've lived in this area for 48 years.
Thank you. Other comments? 1, 2, and 3 in the back, 4 in the back. You 2 after these 2. Okay? Thank you.
Nate Brower, resident of Kaysville. I actually just have a question, and I'm nervous asking a question I don't know the answer to. Not something I would typically do, but process-wise, right? So if a developer comes in, they come in and they present their development plan and plat, right? And some of these unknowns that are, are rightfully concerning to a lot of people. I'm not. Are they typically addressed in that development plan?
You want me to answer that? So what you'll do is, once the zone's established, so if it's R18, they come in to develop it, they're going to have their guidelines. They're going to have the 25-foot setback, single family, unless they do and then that's going to go off of however they, because you're talking zone right now. So if somebody come in and bought that piece of property, there's a house on it, it's single family R18 right now. Then if they want to go from that, they would subdivide it in an R1 zone. And then what they would do is subdivide it, they'd create lots, and that's where you're gonna start getting the different lots, frontage, depending whether they have single family or single family, which are twin home lot. That's where all that's gonna come play. So you're gonna go off of the zone, and then if the zone's established at R18, then whoever comes in and subdivides it goes off the zone to make the lots, create the lots. If the zone was RM, then they would come in and they develop to the zone. And whatever our setbacks, if the zone was changed, somebody come in to develop it, they could go off of what the zoning ordinance says, and as long as it met all the guidelines of the ordinance, it would be approved. And so that's the difference. The R18's already established, there's a single family on that parcel, and it's done until they come in and then they want to subdivide it. Then they could create whatever lots. If that piece of property was zoned tonight or city council RM, it's done. There's a house on it, and or then they can start to bring in projects, and as long as they met the setbacks and didn't exceed this units, then we go to that.
Okay. All right.
That's how it would work.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ike Anderson, and I actually live at the property. And I'm the least of everybody. I just don't want to see it develop because I live there. But I understand that it's just kind of that time, and it's sort of inevitable. My question is, I've heard a lot of people talk about traffic and single-family homes and townhomes, and be happy to forward this to the Planning Commission, but we did have reached out to a couple people. Andy Murray at CRS Engineering got some studies, not specifically for the area, but overall generally, and the townhomes are 5.81 trips per day, where an actual single-family home is 9.52. So you're almost double having homes in there if you're worried about traffic coming in and out. It's really hard to get a developer to put anything concrete as far as plans and engineering and design. We've talked to several, and there's some mock-ups out there, but nothing concrete. If they're gonna have to put all this cost into putting a design, and they don't even know if it's gonna be R18 or R20 or RM. So, you know, you're at a loss there because you don't know what you're getting unless you know the actual, what it's zoned for. So I do agree with quite a few people's comments, though, with the water and the curb and gutter on our side of the street on First South. On the south side, it would be nice to see a curb and gutter put in there. When they redid the road for the orthodontic office, it kind of pushes all that water to the south side and ends up flooding our yard in particular, and maybe gets over into other people. So I had contacted the city about that a couple years ago, and that would love to see that if that's at all possible too. And hopefully, you know, especially the trees that are on the fence line with the Gailey Lane subdivision, you know, in particular, hopefully with whatever goes in, even R8, I think most of those could be kept, those trees right up on the fence line. But that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Two in the back? There were two in the back? Is there just one in the back now? Okay. Yeah, and then ma'am, you'll be third.
Hi, my name is Tyler Ferguson. I live on Gailey Lane, which is adjacent to the property. I'll just be really brief. I think I speak for a lot of my fellow neighbors in that we're not opposed to life going on and developing. We understand that happens. We just feel that for what the area was originally intended for, single-family homes would be ideal. In listening to the applicant's concerns about being unable to take care of the property, it's too big, the house is too old, he's getting older, I fail to see how those concerns would not be alleviated by developing the area for what it was originally intended for, which is single-family homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick Flint. I live just 2 houses north of the property in Kaysville. Let me pose a question, forgive my ignorance. If the zoning question was postponed until a developer was selected, does the city have the ability to make the zoning change approval contingent on certain aspects of a plan, a development plan?
Melinda, do you want to answer that?
So essentially, no. The applicant is entitled to an expedient processing of their application. We don't have a code that requires that you have a developer on board to have a rezone application. So, I mean, I think the short answer is no. Once the zone is set, whatever is in that zoning code that's allowed, the requirements, as Mr. Jessup was just saying a moment ago, the setbacks, the lot size, height, all of that is, they're permitted once a project meets all of those requirements. So we couldn't retroactively say, all right, we'll approve this, but contingent on bringing on a developer later on. That just, I don't think would be a legal maneuver that we could do.
So my question, I think it's backwards. My question is, if the zoning approval is postponed until the developer is already selected, then that developer comes and says, we want to change the zoning of this property. At that point, can the approval of the zoning change be made contingent on certain aspects of a plan for the development? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, anybody can submit an application to rezone property at any point. Really the only restriction that we have in place is that if a rezone application is processed and something's denied, you have to wait a year to reapply for that same zone. I think more specifically to answer your question, you don't have to have a developer on board to approve a rezone. You don't have to have a developer on board to have a development agreement in place. But once that rezone is, and other individuals tonight have mentioned this, once the rezone has been approved, the city doesn't have any leverage on specifying, look, our code says this, but we're going to require you to do this instead or in addition. Does that answer your question?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm not understanding. Obviously, I'm not understanding what you're asking.
Maybe let me see if I can. Melinda, could the Planning Commission recommend a position on the rezone and have one of a condition of approval or a recommendation to the council to have a development agreement as part of consideration of the rezone?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't have to. I mean, the Planning Commission could make a motion to delay action until a development agreement is brought forward. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Yep. No, it's okay.
Call it the pain.
I'm sure I'm not using the right terminology.
A pain and the long day. So, but I don't think that we could say. I don't think that we could say we're not going to process or give a recommendation until you have a developer on board. And it's really so. The mechanism, it doesn't matter. You can be just a regular citizen like yourself and develop property and be termed a developer, right? So, but I think we think of the terms of developers, Ivory Homes or, Boyer, those large developers. So a development agreement doesn't have to be tied to a corporation or a company like that. We could still have a development agreement with the applicant as it stands.
Okay.
That's something that the Planning Commission would have the purview on.
Thank you. So, I would just say all the concerns have been voiced. Parking's an issue, traffic's an issue. At peak hours, it's hard to turn left out of that neighborhood already. I've got kids, safety's a concern along that road. It's already busy, people drive too fast, water's an issue, all the same concerns. I guess I would just ask the commission to consider those as you make a decision on the zoning change, because right now, if you change the zoning, somebody can come in and build whatever they want as long as it meets those criteria. we need a plan in place that's going to help mitigate the impact of the increased traffic, increased runoff from a developed lot, et cetera. Thank you.
I'll be really brief as well, because I know, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. But my name is Natalie Quillen, and I feel like really what this comes down to, and I'm actually not against making money, for heaven's sake, I would love to make a bunch of money. But that's getting rezoned because they stand to make a ton more money if it's a single family dwelling home. And then the developer also stands to make a ton of money. The problem is we that live in the neighborhood, we're the ones that get all of the bad impact from that. And there's a lot of us in here, and then there's two parties that make a lot of money. But we get all the runoff, and I know that the Gailey homes flooded when that big storm was, and that would be even worse if that got developed. There's so many things, and my kids, all of our kids that I love, play in that neighborhood. It's just a busy, busy corner, as we have said. But I just don't think it's fair to the residents of the neighborhood for those two parties to make all that money and then us have the fallout. And again, I am not against making money. I am for it, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Thank you. My name is Kimball Clark. I live a little bit down and around the corner from this property, Hal T. Anderson's property. I've come before you before to just remind you of the plan, and I'm just going to read real quick goals, some of the goals that we have in the land use and peacemaking plan. Goal 1, preserve and protect Kaysville's small town atmosphere by limiting change in functioning neighborhoods and districts. It also talks specifically about creating a distinct city center and expand the heart of the community to include areas beyond the historic core. And it says the implementation measure is to modify existing ordinances and codes to allow for mixed-use development in the Main Street North and Barnes Park neighborhood areas as detailed in the peacemaking plan. It also states, if I can find this, goal number 5, preserve and enhance Kaysville's remaining pastoral atmosphere and agricultural history through careful planning and the preservation of open space. So I just want to remind you of that. If I had several $1 million, I would purchase Hal's property like that because it's absolutely beautiful. And I just encourage you to revisit and reconsider the general plan of the city. Thank you.
Folks, please. That has a chilling effect on someone who may not agree with those comments. So please try not to applaud, okay? And that's okay. And we had one more comment back here. One more person who wanted to speak. One more hand, ma'am. You, yes.
My name's Erin Arnell, and I just had a quick comment with Ike's, and I hope I'm understanding this right. So if he said that there's less traffic with the townhomes, I might be off a little bit on my numbers. I was trying to write it down. But 5.74, but if you have 37 townhomes, that comes out to about roughly 212. If you're 9.5 trips, but only at 13 homes, you're at 123. So you're still at less trips, less traffic with the less homes. So just, I would like to keep that in consideration that it's almost half of what townhomes would be.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody here who hasn't commented? Okay, my apologies. I'm not trying to get you not to speak. But we had a lot more comment than raise their hands, be honest. Please.
Hi, Terrell Rom, citizen of Kaysville. And I guess I'll apologize to my Kaysville citizens. I'm in dissent. I'm in approval of this proposal. I think we need these areas. I think we need these lands. The area right next door is zoned that way. And I understand that there are some serious concerns that do need to be addressed with the neighbors, such as water, sidewalk, and things. And I think the city council and the developer can be able to address those concerns so that we can move forward and grow with Kaysville. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Really, it's okay. Raise your hand. Yes. I just want to say, I don't think anybody has repeated one thing anybody else said, right? right? We've had a lot of repetition. If it's something new, come on, bring it to us.
Well, I don't know if it's new, but I've lived here for 46.
Give us your name. Give us your name.
Montgomery, we live on 62 West, 100 North. And if you want Kaysville to look like Clearfield, Layton, Magna, whatever, by tearing down Rampton's, well, that's a historic home. General plan is to have Kaysville look like Kaysville, not some other city. We live right off 2nd North. We get to look at a 28-foot car wash now. Ripped out all the trees. Now we're going to have huge noise in our backyard. We didn't ask for that or plan for that. If you want Kaysville to have this charm, quit ripping down every historic home there is. Have it look like Kaysville, what people moved here for, not Layton or Clearfield or some other city.
Thank you. Unless there's really something new or you haven't spoken before, we'd like to close the public comment. Is there someone who's got something new to say that has not been heard? Okay. With that, I'd like to close the public we're going to close the public comment. After you speak again. Okay. Come on up.
Thank you. I think underlying this whole...
Give us your name again.
Warren Gates, 91 South, 100 West. I think underlying the fear that this group has of this development lies with 37 housing units, probably average 2 cars per unit. So we're going to put 70-some cars and 37 housing units on 2.89 acres. A personal experience within my family, these 3-story housing units, they park underneath, and they have 2-car parking, but they park end to end, and the people that occupy those units don't park their cars in the garage. They park one, and they'll park the other one on the curb if they can. North Salt Lake has experience with this, and they've had to redline the streets to keep overnight parking and overcrowding.
Thank you. Okay, with everyone's permission, I think it's time to close the public hearing. If you have something new or different, you can always put it in writing to staff. And just to reiterate, we are not a deciding body, we are a recommending body. So no matter what the Planning Commission decides to do on this issue, it will go to the City Council for their eventual adjudication of it, okay? So just remember that. We only recommend, and the council actually, they're the ones who decide on our recommendation. They may set it aside, they may change it, they may deny it, we don't know. But that's to come. So having closed the public hearing, I've returned.
Will we be notified timely on any developments?
With this project?
Yeah.
Will there be further notices sent out with City Council?
There won't be more notices sent out, but you can follow if you go onto our website, and I can help you later if you'd like to subscribe to our agendas. It's on our website. It's a really great tool, actually.
There won't be any direct notice?
No. But if you guys go on Kaysville City website, you can subscribe to emails that are pertinent to public hearings, agendas, following meetings that are subsequent to City Council. So.
What's the typical turnaround? Are we talking like 2 weeks or like 4 months?
Well, first of all, we don't know what the outcome is because the Planning Commission hasn't had a chance to deliberate and come up with a motion or recommendation. Based on that, generally speaking, we get it on to the next possible City Council meeting, which ends up being about 3 weeks after the planning commission meeting, but it depends. So I would let the commission do what they would like to do at this moment. And then when that concludes, I'm happy to give a little bit more direction to those that may still choose to stay, however long that's going to take.
Okay, one more thing before we bring it back to the planning commission. Usually it's customary on something of this where there's so much heat generated to allow the applicant to come back up and provide any clarification on issues that have been brought up, not to make another presentation. Are there questions that you can answer that the audience has?
So I have to come back up?
No, you don't have to. You're more than welcome to not speak at all.
This is an emotional thing for us. We've owned that property 110 years. We're sensitive to the wonderful folks that have spoken tonight. There's all kinds of concerns, and the rural agrarian thing is long gone, and time moves on. I'd be happy to entertain any inquiries that there are.
How much do you want for it?
That's a question for outside the meeting, but certainly all of you know how to get a hold of Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
And
I'd recommend a GoFundMe and we'll all talk. How's that?
okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. With that, we've closed the public hearing and the applicant response, and I'll turn it back to the Planning Commission for discussion on the issue. Planning commissioners and staff, of course, we may ask them questions.
Okay, there's so much. I'll just share some of my initial thoughts. I think that Dan has brought up some interesting points on how we may end up with a better project with the flexibility. I know that there's frustration about having some more affordable income options in the neighborhood. I think that Ferna left, but I'd like to address the concern about why would there be density or lower income housing here in this spot. I am personally interested in seeing density throughout the community, even in West Kaysville. I'm a West Kaysville resident. I think if there is a little more diversity in our economic, as neighbors, if there's some diversity, we have a better ability to absorb that and provide that for that. So I would like to see it really everywhere. But this is an ideal spot in that its location to the city center for walkability. What we want to see in that area is a walkable part of our city. So I do think that there's considerations for that there. My main concern is I would like to see, what I'd love to see is some density with some control. So to see architectural, integrity to preserve that historic element. I'm leaning right now, commissioners will help me and staff to consider that with a plan. I'm not, let me know if I'm mistaken, if we were to come with a plan and consider to rezone, that would give us kind of more information and an option to rezone. That's kind of where I lean in that. I would like to see it. I think it's a good location for it. I think it could be a better project. I think it could have less impact on the traffic. It's going to be developed, so I think that's going to be what it is, so infrastructure is going to be needed either way. But I would really like to see the plan.
Other comments?
Couple of things to address some of the issues that have come up with this project. One was the stormwater runoff. The new guidelines, well, they're not that new, but fairly new for most of you that have resided here for many, many years, require all stormwater to be retained on site. So there are guidelines that whoever develops this property, whether it's a single family or multifamily development, that stormwater, they have to incorporate some kind of control system to retain that stormwater on site. That's something that's no.
No.
That's not a requirement in Kaysville?
No. There, on some developments like commercial, there's detention.
Right.
But not retention.
Okay,
So,
detention.
So what we'll do is they will, if it's available, they'll tie onto storm drains and they'll put orifice plates or something in some, so that they can only disperse so much per hour or minute or whatever, so many gallons per minute. So there's detention, but not retention.
Okay.
Does everybody understand that? What it was just, the question is, we've heard a lot of comment about water retention on the property or water runoff coming from the property. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Shepherd has said, hey, you know, it's a requirement when you develop property, you've got to have a water runoff plan, a storm drain plan. Now, Kaysville requires some storm drain. We have a city engineer, and there is storm drain planning that goes into each project. Now, every city doesn't have curb, gutter, and sidewalk everywhere. I've worked in 2 different cities where half the people in town wanted no curb and gutter because they wanted that rural feel. And the rest of the city is saying, holy cow, we need to have a way to keep the water off my property. And so where we don't have curb and gutter, this developer cannot be required to as an exaction from him or the future developer to put in infrastructure that's not related to the property in question, or street lights, those kinds of things. So the city's going to have its own way of handling that, but you really can't require stuff that's not pertinent to the land being developed. But what Dan is trying to say is there will be a plan to hold the water for a certain period and then to release it slowly through a storm drain plan. And that's how most properties work. You don't completely retain it forever. That's really hard to do. It's hard to do. It creates a pond and it creates a lake, you know, on site that can ruin property. So it's a delicate balance. I hope that helps. Dan, is that accurate?
I think that answers her. Addresses, yes. And that'll only work too where there is storm drain and stuff. And I'm not sure what we got there, and we're too early in. But if it was RM, we turn in plans. It'll be looked at when it goes through plan review. If it's an RM project, if it's a R18, it's just going to be houses, and they might, when they develop it, they might have to put curb gutter in or whatever they decide to make them do at the time of and that's another question, is at time of when they subdivide. Mm-hmm. We're just talking rezone. We're just looking at rezone, what the rules are when they go to subdivide it or build the structure.
So my other one of the other citizens brought up the possibility of putting an access road in there.
Yes.
Is there room for that?
Yes, there would be. They could run a road, keep it R18, run a private street subdivision. Mm-hmm. Private street subdivision would be a 24-foot, I think, is our minimum that the fire. And they could have one property or one entrance in the west, one in the south, 24 wide. I think the fire department would buy off on it. And They probably, the only problem is with doing that, you're gonna run into setback problems.
Right.
And because you're gonna have to have the frontage, 25, 8, 15. Sometimes when they subdivide and do an R18 like that, they will, on a private lane, give some consideration for reduction of setbacks. But that would be that would be at time of subdivision. So, and somebody wouldn't have to go to that expense if they don't want to. The R81 zone wouldn't require somebody to say, hey, let's build another road and let's do all this, because they don't have to. They got frontage out there. And frankly, it'd be stupid if they did it.
Other commission comments?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit, and I want to echo my appreciation for everybody's time here, all of the comments we've received. We've read all of the emails, the letters, including the one that came 20 minutes before the meeting started. We've gone to the property. I also, in looking at this, looked at other parcels in the city that are zoned RM, and it was fairly easy for me to do because I counted up on the zoning map 11 or 12 lots or plots that are zoned RM, and I only found one of them is south of 200 North, or doesn't frontage onto 200 North. The city's talked a lot about having diverse housing options. It's been mentioned a lot of different times. They've also talked about the desire to have it spread out throughout the city. Being in a city that is nearing a built-out status, I believe it was the mayor just last week who in the city council meeting mentioned, like, they can't go out and request rezones. You know, they can't go to a property in West Kaysville or South Kaysville or wherever. We kind of have to take them as they come and consider them as they come. And so that's been, I think, part of that process here, is looking at the location, knowing that the opportunities for this kind of rezone are going to be few. This is kind of in that, you know, if you were to come in a very neutral way, this is kind of in that prime location as far as close to the main street and the retail, very close to public transportation, bus lines, things like that. Every concern that you guys have mentioned is valid. Traffic and all of that, you know, traffic is a lot of the conversation that we have. A lot of the conversation we have for the last big rezone, and the city council spent a lot of time talking about that as well. Looking at future pressures that might come from the legislature. There are requirements that come with the amount of parking spaces that are required for each unit. They may not, you know, fit everyone's, you know, personal preference of how it might happen. I do like that the zoning has the same setback and height requirements. In looking at the other RM buildings and apartments, you know, I looked at them to see, like, how would this fit? What do they look like? How imposing can they be? My first activity ever with the city council or planning was on a rezone proposal to rezone something to RM. So this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I just wanted to make sure I enunciated those things. I believe there are a lot of positives here, despite some changes that it will bring or would bring, hypothetically, to the neighborhood. I like that I would prefer that we not use the term, I would like to stick to the term of, like, diverse housing options. This isn't affordable housing. It's not going to solve any of that. It's just another option that would be out there. We can't pretend that this is, you know, subsidized or any of that kind of stuff. And I also would has been said, to see this kind of development in other parts of the city so that it's spread out. Like I said, I live within walking distance of most of the RM zoned areas in our city. Most of the issues that are brought up about them tend to be much less significant than the initial fear might be. I know that won't make you feel great, when you don't want to see your neighborhood change. And it's interesting how a lot of these things are very similar to some things that have been happening within my family and divesting our family of some historic property that we have. And so I'm very sensitive to your feelings on all of that. But yeah, knowing that there's the same setbacks, there are parking requirements, things like that, I feel like there are a lot of things in the code that will prohibit, kind of a runaway type of activity or experience.
Thank you, Commissioners, for your comments. I'll try to keep my comments brief. First of all, I would like to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Packer and thank all of you for coming out. Democracy is so important that we have a place where we can speak and we can agree or disagree, and that we have the ability to tell each other how we feel about things. And I'm grateful that planning and zoning gives us the opportunity to have really healthy public comment. Now, to give some of you background, I was an urban planner for about 34 years before I became on the Planning Commission. And so I've had a lot of experience in this area. But as I've come to serve this city, and I've been a resident for a long time, raised my kids here. I've been here, well, going on half my life. It seems so fast, 27 years ago. But I can identify with every single one of you and the comments that you raised, just not from my career, but from my living experience in Kaysville. My experience in Kaysville was I lived on a dead-end street for 8 years. We had no through traffic, and I specifically bought my lot there knowing there were wetlands to the west, a church farm to the east, and a major road up the street from me. And I had researched and gone into UDOT. I knew West Davis Highway or Legacy was coming, but I never thought it would come to my neighborhood. And I've sat on committees and listened to countless discussions with UDOT and cities, and I'm telling you, a lot of my biggest fears have come to pass. So no matter what I say or vote tonight, I will tell you this. I would invite any of you to come down to my house and see where I'm at and see the change. Where there was a field and wetlands are now 200 homes. I have probably 2,000% more traffic than I had. And guess what? A lot of my neighbors, they don't do 25 up my road. No, they seem to think that their great big pickup has to be mashed completely to the floor to get up to that road to turn right or left. Man, that's just not going to make it on that 4 or 5% road. It's unbelievable how insensitive we can be with traffic. So I'm going to live between two interchanges. The noise is already deafening, and it used to be quiet. I used to have cows in my backyard, moths flitting around the alfalfa. So believe me, I know the fears that you have, and I had them with my first house in Midvale 30 years ago. But I will tell you this, as difficult as my experience has been in Kaysville, I wouldn't give up my neighborhood, my neighbors, those new people who moved in east and west of me, some of the best people I know. And I wouldn't change them for anything, even with the impacts. I will also tell you this, that having watched hundreds of developments, personally shepherding hundreds of developments through the process, rarely have I seen, I don't think ever, not one time, has the amount of fear of the impact of that development ever been as heavy as people thought it was going to be. Not once. Not once. I have gone back to countless developments that I'd worked at in Sandy, in Centerville, in Holiday, in Davis County, places where I worked. You know what? People didn't move. They incorporated those neighbors into their wards, into their French, into their card playing. And it almost never, ever has the impact. So I will say that this rezone, I am concerned about this rezone for one reason only, and that is that we don't have a plan. I would prefer to see that there was a development plan proposed so that we could at least, as neighbors, as residents, have an idea of what to brace for. Something's coming. It's either going to be R18 or RM, right? They're not likely to ask for anything else. I hope the city's codes, when this property is developed, whatever it turns out to be, will guide it in a way with flexibility that it can mitigate a lot of the concerns that you have expressed. So that does bother me. But I will say that this project, as this rezone as proposed, is super walkable, no matter who lives there. They're literally, I mean, I've driven by this place countless times. I went over there today and just put my flashers on and drove around the block, drove around, looked at all the big parcels to the west. There's plenty of room for more single family. We are a terrible city when it comes to multiple family. We are one of the least compliant cities in this state for multiple family. And the tyranny of geography is that a lot of you live near Main Street. You live near an area where there are businesses and schools and other things. Those kinds of places lend themselves to this kind of a proposal. This is a particularly good location. Our current conditions in the state, let me point something out to you. This is an article in today's Salt Lake Tribune. I hope some of you read it. Let me read the headline. Utah housing markets are the least affordable in state history. That should concern all of us. It is now estimated that the average household in Utah makes only 1/5 of the required income to afford the average priced house. If you are a young person in university, or you are a young person, no matter what you're graduating in right now, if you're a young family, there's no place for you. We had 56,000 units short in this state 3 years ago. We've cut that down to 28,000. But with incomes not keeping pace with housing costs, the gap between ability for people to be able to get into even an apartment is almost impossible. People are paying more than I paid for my mortgage. They're paying $2,000 a month for 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, depending on the location. We have almost 30,000 families that don't have a place. It's hurting our economy. Kaysville is not doing its part. I live in West Kaysville. I have come to this city for the last 27 years, most 27 years, when I had time not working for cities I worked for, to tell this council that it was a mistake not to have anything but half-acre development on the west side. I'm the only person I know who's ever gone to a council meeting or a planning commission meeting and said, we need more housing on the west side, because it's causing this kind of a problem. Now, this property is a good property no matter what. But the concerns that have been raised by my fellow planning commissioners are valid. The west side does not have density. And the proposal we did not hear tonight, the one that was canceled, it's calling for more half-acre lots. That's pathetic. The west side is only half-acre or larger. We need diversity down there. Guess what? The diversity that's in my neighborhood was built in Farmington. I live near the Farmington border. They built a whole slew of beautiful condos. Now I get to go to church with these people every week. Guess what? They're great. All my neighbors were fearful of them. Now we love them. Okay? We can't change the fact that our growth is mostly internal. It's not a ton of people coming in from the outside. It's the fact that we have bigger households. We have more children than the average. We have the largest households. We have more women working to support households. We have some of the highest debt in the country. And now we have people who can't afford to buy anything or to even rent. So is this property better for R18? Or is it better for the possibility that we can get some dwellings that will be affordable for at least some people to get into a house? There's no question. There's no question. Single family is unattainable. It's unattainable. I have 3 kids that got into a single family home in the last 3 years. Not one of them today would come close to qualifying. Not one. So I'm grateful for them, but my heart's broken for those who can't afford it. And so this is the tyranny of geography. This is a great location for it. I would also like to, by the way, we are 92% single family in this city. 92%. Most cities in Utah are about 75-25. It's pathetic how we have simply said, you're not welcome here. You're not welcome here. We're not going to do anything but single family. Okay? This remains a good location. Kaysville has not carried its share. And we're, as our staff said, there's a real risk each year we don't show progress. We miss out on funding. We miss out on road grants. You want to keep your roads up? We get money from the state, Class C road money. Okay? Talk to your city manager about it, and your staff. We need those funds. Okay? We are not in step with what we should be doing, and this is a step that we can. The general plan, by the way, which most of you quoted tonight, and I appreciate the fact that you looked at the general plan. I've been involved in, heck, I wrote one, mostly wrote one that a consultant didn't do a good job on, and they all say the same thing. We want to keep things the same. That's human nature. Okay? We all want to keep things the same, but it's not the same. We didn't have light rail or the Olympics in the last 20, 25. Look at all the things that we have had just in the last 10 to 20 years. Our phones have changed. Our lifestyles have changed. Things are going to continue to change, and the pace of change is going to get faster. The general plan is not a binding document. It's advisory. The Planning Commission and the Council do not have to stick with the future land use map. They can look at all those other sections and say, this makes more sense. And in my opinion, as a planning commissioner, it makes more sense to upzone this for higher density, whether it's RM or something else. I don't think R18 is bad. I just think, considering this location, it's better. This petition represents the future, represents a movement toward the future. I heard comments tonight that were flatly inaccurate about demographics. People are now choosing more and more not to live in single-family homes. You want to read surveys? Go to Envision Utah. Envision Utah is a wonderful think tank in downtown Salt Lake. They can tell you through 60,000 surveys that what people are really looking for are small lot single family or condominium townhome development. They don't want the big houses. My kids, not one of my kids wanted a big house. They all grew up on a half acre and they all said, we don't want what you and mom had. Too much work. Too much work. My lot, I haven't mowed my property in years. My neighbors mow it because I got kids who want to go on missions and I pay them to mow my half acre. Why? Because it's too big to mow and too small to plow, right? It's just that sweet spot where you just don't want to go out and deal with a half acre of grass. So I think I've said enough and I've been pretty passionate about it, but
why do we have this meeting if not one person? Only one person supported it. What's the point of the meeting?
because
it requires a decision was made beforehand.
Okay.
You have to do it as part of the city requirement to open it up so we
This is not, sir, this is not a New England town meeting. A New England town meeting is you have the majority of people who stand up and vote, and that's how things go. That is not how land use works in Utah. I did not know, I did not speak to my fellow planning commissioners before this meeting, did not speak to any residents or staff prior to this meeting. I made my own conclusions based on what I saw in the staff report and my own experience and what I've heard. We have not discounted what you have said. We have not. I haven't.
You're also saying a lot of things like we're scared of the people coming in. We're not doing our part to allow affordable housing.
I'm saying generally speaking, I have heard that again and again here in Kaysville. So this is not a debate. I've finished my comment. I'm now bringing this back to the Planning Commission and say, is there consideration for a motion based on our discussion tonight and the petition in front of us? As chair, I'm not going to make, it's not customary for the chair to make a motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that let's see if I can get the wording right. That we recommend for approval to the City Council the rezoning of the property at 41 West 100 South from R18 single family residential to RM multiple family residential.
Any conditions or requirements?
No, I do not have any.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion by planning commissioners?
Is there a possibility to recommend with option for a development agreement? So the city has an option for that agreement?
That's up to Commissioner Packer. So we have an amendment to the motion suggested by Commissioner Young.
I'm not opposed to that at all. Is that feasible? Is that something you can pass on to the? I don't know if that would even be something they could even consider.
So the city council, I mean, regardless of what the planning commission's recommendation is, the city council can make whatever decision that they want. So if they wanted to see a development agreement, they don't need to have a recommendation from the planning commission to have a development agreement. They could come to that conclusion on their own. I hope that.
But we could put that forward as a recommendation that the city council could do what they want with.
You could. The tricky part, right, is that I mean, you certainly can do that, but without having any contents or a development agreement for the planning commission to look at or recommend, it still is essentially, I think, the same outcome as Commissioner Packer's motion. So if you wanted to have a development agreement, I think the best approach would be to direct staff as to what you would like to see changed versus what the zone allows. And then we could bring back a draft of the development agreement, or you could just specify in an amendment to the motion of this is what we would like to see. Or again, you can just have that motion and recommend that the city council give that direction to staff themselves instead of having that come from the planning commission.
Commissioner Packer, are you open to the amendment of the development agreement, or?
I am. I mean, I do remember the comments about the reluctance that a developer might have to put the effort and time and money into creating a plan for a piece of property that isn't guaranteed it would even be rezoned. But I have no problem putting that into the proposal.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. It's been accepted by the motioner. I will call the question. Commissioner Shepard?
Nay.
I would second that.
Okay, well, thank you. We have a second on the motion. Okay, vote on the motion to approve to recommend approval of the rezone with a recommendation for a development agreement to the city council.
For me, it's no. Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-1. This will now go to the city council for their consideration.
So I would anticipate this would go to the city council probably at the October 5th meeting.
Folks, look for the October 5th meeting at the city council to make your comments there, okay? That's what's being proposed, October 5th.
Sorry to see all those trees go. I love that piece of property.
Good job. Good job. I'm not gonna shake your hand in front of everybody, but good job on your application. Yeah. No. Good job, Aaron. Good job, Mike. Deborah. Good. Good. October 5th is City Council is, yeah, now watch the website, because remember, we're just recommending. Yeah, there won't be an additional mailed notice. There won't be. Yeah. Good luck. Good luck. Good job. Aaron, good job. Yeah, that's a hard one. Well, all the cities I've worked for.
Invite them to step out so we can finish the meeting.
Oh, folks, we still have the meeting in session. If you can move outside, we still have items. Thank you. Okay. Continuing the meeting, we have the call to public. Seeing none, we'll move on to other matters come before the Planning Commission. Staff reports, correspondence, and calendar. Folks, we're still in session conducting business. Thank you. If you could please take your comments out. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Just call to public.
Call to the public, yes.
What do you want me to say about myself? Anything?
So, yeah, can you just, especially
Say my address?
Give us a second. Give us a second.
everyone, we still have a meeting to finish, so if you could take your comments outside, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
We just would like your name and city of residence.
So, my name's Sarah Love, and I live in Kaysville. I just wanted to say, I know you guys already voted, but I think that was a good choice. I think that we need diverse housing, and I think that's the perfect place. It's already in the neighborhood, and I live just around the corner. So I think it was a good idea, and I just wanted to thank you guys for your time and putting in the study, that you did. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah, and special thanks to our staff for an excellent staff report. It's a hard one because public how they're going to feel. But, I just really think it was well done, well researched, and I appreciate the comment.
And really, the people that are complaining about it, they wouldn't be in their houses if their neighborhood, if their lot hadn't been rezoned however long ago. They wouldn't have a place to live either.
And,
So,
and at every meeting,
it's hard.
I used to sit where Melinda does.
Yeah.
No, and you know what? Every time, who built your house? Who complained when your house was being built? No one wants to think about that.
Yeah.
But
And honestly, I know that they probably don't want to let go of their family heritage property, but I think it's a little unreasonable to expect that a single family pay for the cost, especially now that we're having to pay for our secondary water. That's a really huge burden to ask for anybody, and eventually, that lot could just be abandoned because they can't afford it or whatever. So anyway, that's all I just wanted to say.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And I'm personally into historic preservation, having done it for several cities. It kills me to see that house is going to go. But at the same time, if you're living in it, a house that's 140 years old?
The original foundation wall was even older than 1873. It was in the 1850s. It's adobe brick.
Yeah.
Pioneer adobe brick
Yeah.
in the 1850s by, I forgot the guy's name.
Somebody should move it.
Might have been my ancestor.
If you look on an arborist website, they're 80 to 100 gallons a day.
Yeah.
And there used to be a stream flowing in there, but in the late 80s, they didn't have a stream. So, and you can water 2 days a week, and then you've got the neighbors calling and complaining they can water more.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable.
It's hard to see those historic properties go, but man, change is hard. But thanks for your comments.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Anybody else call to the public? Anybody else from the public like to come up and speak? Nope. Okay. We'll move on to other matters before the Planning Commission. Reports, correspondence, calendar, anything, staff?
We have the APA conference coming up 2 weeks
28th,
from
29th.
today.
Yeah.
So
Did that link, I don't know if my mic is still working.
I emailed,
Did we get the wrong link?
I sent the wrong link, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
I got the agenda today. I got it today.
Okay, I replied all and attached the agenda. So that's there for you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Other than that, I really don't have much to say because I think we all want to go home. But thank you. I know this was hard tonight, it always is, but appreciate.
Part of the job?
Appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, I thought planning commissioners brought up good points. I appreciate it. So, I'm not the chair, but I enjoyed chairing at least one meeting.
You did great.
Well, I've been to a lot of them. I've been over 2,000 of these, so planning commissioner, city council meetings since 1987. So 2,000, probably close to 2,300. Not including all the impromptu night meetings, like inviting the public to come in after a public hearing like this and saying, we'll hold a special meeting just for you to teach you about zoning. Well, I've done that so many times. Or election meetings. City council member wants you to come and talk about zoning for every district. So anyway, so I got burned out.
I guess it's to you to adjourn us.
Yeah, make it official.
Yes, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, Aaron.
Hey, can I share something?